Good evening and welcome to the Strategy Room. It's Rick Wilson, your host this evening, joined by, of course, Stuart Stevens and the estimable Joe Trippi. We are going to talk tonight a little bit about what's been going on over the last couple days. Two big top line topics. Number one, the insanity of RFK Jr., and then we're going to jump into discussing the other insanity of Donald Trump's Bret Baier interview on Fox the other night, which I have to tell you, if you had told me Trump took his you know what out and set it on fire, I would have been less likely to believe the events that we saw in that Bret Baier interview. But first, I do want to launch out and start the conversation with the rise and rise of RFK Jr. in the national media space. I have a theory of the case that RFK Jr., because I know that Steve Bannon has been soliciting him and working him, Steve and John Zogby and Dick Morris and this weird constellation of goons, has convinced this guy who is clearly, in my mind, pretty mentally unbalanced, um, to run for president in the Democratic primary. They're trying to flip what we do at the Lincoln Project, flip the Bannon line over and draw away kooky Democrats from Joe Biden. We need every Democrat, including the kooky ones right now, in order to defeat Donald Trump or whomever emerges from the swamp if Donald Trump dies of a heart attack. But the things that Kennedy's been saying, guys, have been so beyond cuckoo, and it's led to this entire like Joe Rogan, Elon Musk, David Sachs, Steve Bannon, including one of our former colleagues from Lincoln is now predicting that RFK Jr. is going to surge. I think it's all crazy talk, but since it's crazy talk, let's get down to it. Stuart, before, and I know Joe has Kennedy family experience, but Stuart, talk to me about where you see this guy as a presidential candidate and as a human being.
Well, what'll be really fascinating to me is to see how African American voters respond to him.
Ah, interesting.
Um, because, one of the last great appearances that his dad made was in Indianapolis, the night that uh, King was assassinated. And uh, he appeared with Richard Lugar, the mayor, gave this incredible speech where he quoted classics and then left. Um, I think it would be safe to say that you can't win a Democratic primary unless you do very well with African American voters. And
Facts.
this seems to me to be exactly what you're saying, that a kind of suburban, more female than male, um, kind of vegetarian, I don't want my kid vaxxed movement, which
Right.
doesn't seem to have a lot to do with your average African American voter in South Carolina. Um, Flip side, if he started to do well with those voters, it would probably mean something. But I kind of can't see that happening.
Yeah, I think it's a tough run. Now, Joe, you know more about Democratic primaries than anybody around this table. So, what is your thought on? I mean, look, I don't think there's a case to be made as a Democratic candidate. I think he's a protest weirdo, talked into
Right.
this by Bannon and company. But what do you think? How do you think Democratic voters are going to see this as we go forward?
I don't think it's going anywhere. I mean, look, the reality is this is, I think, a run to get the kooky Democratic voters to soften up Biden with
Right.
those people, and and give Trump an opening to bring them over, and Bannon that opening. But look, I started what's crazy about this is I started my political career working for Ted Kennedy, in his challenge of an incumbent president, Jimmy
Right.
Carter, in
Right.
1980, and from that experience alone, it cost the Democratic Party and Carter. Whether Carter could have beaten Reagan or not, that's a different thing. But what it all got us was, from a Democratic point of view, 8 years of Reagan and 4 years of George Herbert Walker Bush. So I think the irony's there. But look, the entire Kennedy family is opposed to this. Will be out there urging people to not vote for Robert Kennedy. I talked to Junior. I talked to a very close friend of his a few days ago who was heartbroken that he's
Sure,
been
I bet.
lured into doing this. The To get to your question though, Rick, the one kind of problem that is out there that I think needs to get addressed somehow is the way Iowa and New Hampshire under the new rules of the Democratic Party nomination fight. They aren't their primary; they're not in the calendar. Um, they're still going to
Right.
happen because Trump and the Republicans will hold caucuses and primaries in those two states, and there will be the Democratic committees in those two states are going to hold contests. I right now I think the Biden people have decided they're going to follow the rules and they will not play in those states. That
Right.
could open up a scenario where um, only 8,000 people vote in Iowa, or 9,000 of them vote in New Hampshire, but Kennedy could pick up some of those votes there, and,
Joe,
Right.
and
Joe,
yeah,
let me ask you just a point of information on that, right? The way that's going to work is Biden is still going to be on the ballot. Biden Harris still has to be on the ballot to get the delegates, right?
no, those contests will not be in the.
They will not be
Here's
in the
what,
delegate count,
yeah, what happened last
right?
time. This has happened before, and what happened last time was they held a vote. I can't remember who they all voted for, but it wasn't. And what happened was at the convention, the nominees said, "Yeah, let's seat them." It's like a fig leaf, of course. Let's seat New Hampshire's delegates or
Right.
whatever, and it gets papered over. But the press, who wants, I think, does want to make this fight happen for clicks and giggles and ratings,
Right.
uh, is likely to report, under this scenario that
But
RFK Jr. did well. I think one of the things that I have heard kicked around is that a former senator or two would run in Biden's place. In other words, put their names on the ballots or run as
Right. Right.
Biden stand-ins. But I'm just saying that it's not it's something that should be worried about a little bit. But I don't think in the end it will matter long term. I don't think he's going to. Oh, he got 40% of 8,000 votes in New Hampshire is not going to make something happen out there. I think
Right.
people are onto this, particularly given the crazy positions he's taken, which Rick has a very good understanding of. I mean, some insane stuff like
I'm always the in-house expert on crazy conspiracy people.
the feminization of frogs. I mean, is that that's
Chemtrails, feminization of frogs. He believes that we have to ban Wi-Fi, which because he believes that it melts the blood-brain barrier and allows toxins to enter your mind.
yes,
Just so y'all know, he is the leading anti-vaxxer in the country. He has funded and been funded by these weirdo anti-vax groups. They are a big part of this fight. And I have to tell you, he's been empowered recently by Elon Musk, David Sachs, all the usual, you know, crazy Twitter troll nihilist idiots. Um, and honestly, Twitter is absolutely unusable today because the anti-vax crazies are out in their
yeah.
many hundreds of thousands.
yeah.
So with that, I mean, look, RFK folks, he's Steve Bannon's meat puppet. If you're a Democrat and you think the family name means something here, it does not. He
Right.
might as well be named Robert F. Bannon because he is Steve Bannon's toy,
Well,
and that's the plan.
so guys, let me ask you this. So, um, the first convention, actually, I guess it's the first convention I ever went to, was the Kennedy Carter convention in New York City at Madison Square Garden,
Wow.
um, where I wrote a piece
I
about
was
it
on the
for the Texas Observer. Um, and that famous moment when when Carter was stalking Kennedy across the stage, trying to get both hands up. Is there a scenario where Kennedy will speak at the Democratic convention?
no. No, not at all. I mean, first of all, I was a floor manager on the floor of that convention.
No,
Like for
because
that,
somebody like a Ron Klain is going to be running the
yeah,
convention, and they're going to say, not only no, But hell no with bells on
Yeah.
top, hell no with icing, and here's a cookie. No.
There will not be a a caucus of they won't be a counting of votes. I just don't think it's even going to happen. I mean,
So, guys,
again,
let me ask you.
two
Let me ask you.
places he could score won't even have
Let,
delegates
let me
unless that's
let me.
nice.
So, if you're the Biden people, right? Your instinct is just to ignore this, which is probably the wise advice. But is there not a case to be made that um, running against crazy makes you look less crazy? Running against crazy as Donald Trump, running against crazy as RFK Jr. That if Biden can go out there and just is this not a kind of way to define himself even more? It's like the sane guy, or is it? Are you
I,
just get into any engagement reduces you?
I think this one. I think this guy is so pernicious with all this really insane conspiracy stuff that one day he's going to say, yeah, Robert F. Kennedy has really crazy ideas about vaccines. The next day, Robert F. Kennedy's going to say, you know, you're part of the global CIA cabal to, defend yourself against me, debate me over 5G chips in the vaccines or
yeah.
whatever,
Mhm.
wackadoodleness he goes for.
Yeah, I think. Look, I think this is all what the press corps I think has missed because they report these things all sort of it's a separate story. So, like the RFK Jr. story is separate from the no labels story, which is separate from Trump. And
Mhm.
what you really have here is, look, there's only one person who has any possibility of benefiting from RFK whacking away at Joe Biden. That's Donald Trump. There's only one
Right.
guy who benefits from no labels putting a third party candidate on the ballot. It's Donald Trump. Donald Trump's votes not going to splinter. You're not splitting anything away from that. Can Robert Kennedy Jr. peel away some of the anti-vax Democrats or whatever and
Yep.
sort of move them over? Can no labels all draw from Biden because that's it's only the pro democracy or the moderate vote that's going to get split. It's not going to be the MAGA crazy vote that gets split. I think all these things, particularly when you look at Bannon being the person one of the people that was enticing RFK Jr. to do this. You look at who's funding no labels. It all,
Right.
what the press corps I think hasn't done a good job of is where the Woodwards and Bernsteins connecting all those dots, digging deep into where the money's coming from,
That's
things
such a
like
good
that.
point, Joe. That's such a good point. And it's so, I mean, look, folks, this is a fraud being
Yeah.
exercised on the American people. No labels is a fraud. RFK Jr. is a fraud. And by the way, if either of those two things fall apart, they'll find some other weird angle to go at to try to do. They've learned they've learned a lesson from the Lincoln Project that you can split off certain disaffected, more center of the lane voters. They're going to try to do what we did, only for evil instead of for good. Um, but this isn't Camelot, folks. It's Scamelot. It is a fraud.
Yeah.
So now, with that, guys, tonight we're missing at the moment the airing of part two of the Bret Baier drags Donald Trump across a parking lot full of broken glass show. Um, you guys have by now seen the clips, or at least seen that interview from last night. I have to tell you, I look at it this way. I'm going to get your thoughts on it first. You, Stuart. I looked at it weirdly as a proxy fight inside of Fox. I thought Bret Baier wanted to take the journalists column of Fox, which is small and weak right now, and basically lay down a stake and say, I'm going to do what a journalist does, even with this goddamn guy.
Yeah.
But it was
Yeah.
a
Yeah.
disaster front to back.
Yeah. I have some painful memories of Bret Baier interviewing Mitt Romney, where he really took it to Mitt on a couple occasions. Um, I think probably there was an ambush here that Trump went in thinking that this was going to be, friendly territory,
Yeah,
um, which is, always bad. Brett would go in and, you're my friend, blah, 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 the way they always do. Um, My question to you guys is this going to matter? Is it the that Trump vote? Are they going to look at who is going to
I don't think
benefit
so.
or not benefit from this? Or
I
is it
kind
No,
of thought of this today as like resistance porn. You know, it's funny, but I don't think it changes the minds of Trump voters. I mean, the Trump e or conservative type of intelligentsia today that were out saying now Trump is doomed, like Eric Erickson. Those guys want to be with Ron DeSantis anyway. They don't. They're all looking for a miracle against Trump. So I don't think there's really a miracle to be had. But I think I just don't think a lot of this thing is as
so is this going to show up in a Ron DeSantis super PAC negative ad?
I don't think so because Ron DeSantis is fundamentally playing an inside straight. I'm going to win Iowa. I'm going to try
right.
to overperform in New Hampshire. I'm going to win Iowa. That'll take me into South Carolina and get me to Florida. That's where DeSantis is, and he doesn't seem to be going at Trump with any angle other than I'm a better candidate than Biden. He's not touching Trump on it, so I don't think he plays that game.
Yeah,
The other
what I
question is if he's already said he'll consider pardoning Trump or he'll pardon Trump,
yeah.
so where's that put him? You know?
Yeah, I don't think I look. I think the one thing I was at, Fox for a long time, and Brett,
Yeah, we
you,
know, Joe.
no, but no, but I mean, but you're right, Stuart. I mean, he is a journalist when he gets in this mode, and he took it to him. What's fascinating to me about that was when I was there, there was always this. All the news folks like Baier believed that if they could get rid of the crazy opinion guys, they'd have a great network. And the crazy opinion guys all thought if they could get rid of Bret Baier and the newsies, they'd have a great network. And it was really fascinating to watch Brett take. I think you're right. He was putting down a marker for the journalists inside Fox. I thought.
Yeah, I think that I mean that's really my sort of favorite theory of the case right now because there's a sense in my mind of they felt embattled. They feel like they won a small thing getting rid of Tucker, but it's certainly not over yet inside of
Right.
the two camps inside of Fox.
So let me ask you this, guys. Will this be a push for DeSantis to sit down with Breyer? Is that going to happen, do you think?
You
Because he
know,
hasn't
That's
really done
interesting.
any tough interviews, has he?
no,
No.
he goes around and interviews with people like the Gateway Pundit or Florida's Voice, which is this pet right wing website
Right.
that he'll allow them to ask three questions in a press conference and then they'll say no more questions, we're out. They really exist in that bubble right now of hand holding and pure, you're the tallest handsomest man in the room, Ron. We don't even need to ask you questions, we just know how wonderful you are. He's got a lot of stenographers who are, and look, I think there's like a quota system at National Review, like every writer has to produce 2 DeSantis stories a week or something.
Yeah, they are so desperate to invent. So, I mean, here's a guy on almost every level is against everything the National Review was for on any kind of basic level. The
Limited
power of the
government,
state
right?
coming
Power of
in
the state, right?
after a corporation. Um, this whole, anti-intellectualism of DeSantis. So, I mean, this is a magazine founded by William Buckley. Really?
Right.
Um, I mean,
Right.
um, and their need to defend him, like when he went out and said that it was a territorial dispute between Russia and Putin. And then he
Right.
tried to kind of clean it up by saying that Putin was a war criminal. Those two are not contradictory.
Right.
The guy
Yeah.
running Lord's Resistance Army, which in Eastern Congo,
Hmm.
before he killed him, he was a war criminal, and that
Right.
was a territorial dispute.
Right.
Um, there were territorial disputes in Bosnia where there were war criminals. Um, that's exactly what they were. Um, and their need to write, well, this isn't really contradictory. Um, I don't know. it's just so sad to see because there's not any substance to it. So let me, Rick, something I've been wanting to ask you. Do you think DeSantis is going to pivot away from the woke stuff and try to put together like some solid economic plans? Like, is there going to be a Ron DeSantis tax cut plan? Is there going to be a Ron DeSantis,
I think, Stuart, you could put any Ron DeSantis plan on the back of a 3x5 card.
you know,
I think it's gonna. I don't think that inside the Republican primary structure there's any space. I mean, he might do it after the convention or after he gets the nomination, if he got the nomination. But between now and then, that's just a risk factor. That's just something for a Chris Christie to pick apart, or somebody else to go in and attack him on. And look, Ron DeSantis' entire position is not, I'm going to pass tax cuts or reduce regulation. It's, I'm going to put black people in their place by reducing diversity programs in public institutions. I'm going to take books off the shelves that I don't want kids to read because crazy Proud Boy moms decided that Anne Frank and Rosa Parks were unacceptable content. His other position is, I'm going to attack corporations because they won't agree with my anti-LGBT standards. I don't think he needs much more for this Republican primary base.
So, Rick, do you think that, you said his game plan is Iowa, New Hampshire, South Carolina, get to Florida? You think that's a path that's realistic? Can he do that?
I don't think he can. I think the Florida strategy, which when it was briefed to me in the Rudy Giuliani meeting, I looked at the guys as one of three Florida men in the room. I looked over at his chief strategist. I said, "That is the dumbest fucking idea I've ever heard of all time." And I've done a lot of statewide races in the state. This is insanity. Stop it. It's the same battle plan, be out part two. We all know how the national media behaves. Once there's a momentum coming out of New Hampshire, Iowa, and South Carolina, it rarely breaks a different direction. It rarely has a real sea change in one of these later states.
Mhm.
And Florida, the thing about Florida is DeSantis' numbers here are very fine, but Trump still is basically almost 2-1 over the guy in the state of Florida, and with many other people entering the race, other choices, it's going to dilute. That vote doesn't come out of Trump; it comes out of DeSantis.
Right.
well, also, I think, look, it takes 32,000 votes to sort of win Iowa. Um, and no one, well, Romney won Iowa and New Hampshire for a couple of weeks. And then it came out that maybe Santorum actually won by like 2 votes. But, Romney won it when it counted,
Right.
when it was being looked at. And then we went into South Carolina and got killed,
Right.
and came back in Florida. It's always seemed to me that Trump could have a backup strategy of Florida's going to run against the governor of a state in Florida. Just to everybody take a pass in Florida. You don't have to do that. If he saw that he wasn't going to win, I mean, that's what happened with. There's a tradition of that happening, or history of
Yeah.
it happening.
The other,
Um,
yeah, yeah. The other thing I think that DeSantis is doing, the reason he's fighting with Gavin Newsom, is DeSantis is trying to get in the news cycle out in California as a potential hole card late in the game, because California never matters in the
Yeah.
GOP primary, but it is a gigantic pool of delegates.
Yeah.
So I think he may be playing that game a little bit too.
yeah, no, that's a really smart point. People forget there were more Trump voters in California than any other state.
Correct. And
So
more Republican voters in California than any other state, just broadly.
by the
I mean,
number.
it is definitely, I think that's why he's doing all this little spritzing with Gavin Newsom every week, and trying to get up in his grill on things,
Well,
because
It's a good
it's a
point.
backup.
Rick, do you think that Las Vegas, guy running the Trump campaign now,
Yeah.
do you think that they're going to try to put together a serious caucus turnout operation to compete with DeSantis?
I don't know that answer, Stuart.
Yeah.
I think it's unlikely because there's not a lot of skim for Trump to take out of it. You know, there's not a lot of points in that for Trump to pull out as a profit center. but I do think he has less of a need for that kind of operation. I think that Trump has so much built-in name ID and goodwill with Republican base voters that that's an easier lift than do I change horses from the great for the third term of our greatest president.
Yeah, the third term. Yeah, I mean, so look, so they're focusing on turnout. I mean, if you turn out 100% of 21%, you get 21%. If you turn out 75% of 45%, you crush that. So,
Right.
I have this sense that there's not really this lack of sort of a message that's really catching on to expand beyond a little base for the DeSantis.
Yeah.
Um, you only get to vote once. Um,
Yeah, and I think that he's trying to engineer another boomlet with this very busy travel schedule. I think he's
mhm.
trying to engineer that right now. I don't know how successful that's going to be, just because Trump has continued to suck down all the media in the room, good and bad, and DeSantis, he will not engage with the rest of the reporting and media coverage sphere outside of his comfort zone. So seems kind of isolated. And it's basically Ron and Casey running the campaign. And Casey's turning into every cliche of what Republicans always Hillary was. The power behind the throne, the secret
Mhm.
manipulator, the vengeful spirit, who anyone who slights them gets punished and thrown out into the outer darkness. So I don't think it's easy.
Yeah. I mean, the amazing thing though is how the rest of the field has just vanished. I mean, just disappeared. I mean, it's like there is
Aside
no.
from Christie, right? Is anybody
Yeah.
making a splash? You guys seen anything
No.
other than Christie?
No. They had a 1 day thing. Scott.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I just don't see how you win a race when your premise is I agree with everything the guy did as president last time, but I'm running against him. I don't know. Like, how does that really work? But you know, if Trump got hit by a bus or ate too many Big Macs and keeled over,
Right.
Christie would go after Ron DeSantis with a
Oh yeah, in a
blowtorch.
hot
Yeah.
second.
I mean,
And I still, you guys all, and Stuart, Charlie, I know Charlie. I still go back to that debate. Charlie Crist, a spent force, a worn out old war horse in this state, still knocked Ron DeSantis's dick in the dirt in a debate with
yeah.
a question he should have been prepped for. It was malpractice of his staff not to have him ready to answer that question. And he sat there for 9 seconds going,
Yep. Yep.
and I can imagine you're going to see a lot of people on the debate stage, whoever makes it to the debate stage, absolutely going completely wild against DeSantis, all hoping to level the field and lay a blow on the guy.
Well,
Yeah,
who
well, that
couldn't
would be a repeat
say
of 16, right?
Yes, it would.
Where you're
Yes,
you're
it
you're
would.
playing for second place. In
Yep.
16, it was because no one could assume or imagine Trump winning. Um,
But who
yeah,
could? But
I mean, there will
but
be an
who could
interesting
make it?
point in this race. The likelihood of it becoming more about 28 than 24 is not small.
I
And
believe that is
Yeah,
correct.
absolutely true.
you
Yep.
know, um, and who is going to be positioning? Um, because you're in this weird situation that we certainly haven't had in modern politics, where if the guy in your party he's not an incumbent, and the guy in your party wins, he's only going to serve one term.
Right.
Yeah.
We haven't had that. Um, so
I mean, other than
But
Reagan, and Bush was perceived as a transitional figure somewhat, but he would have. I still consider he would have won, except for Perot and Buchanan going after him. But ooh, that brings me back to RFK for a minute, because
that's
he's
exactly what I'm.
basically the Pat Buchanan to Joe Biden's
yeah,
41.
Right,
that's
and
why
then
I
you
was
have
asking about the
no
convention.
labels doing the Perot thing the other way. It's all
Right?
it's exactly what I was talking about
Yeah.
when we
So
started this.
can we just talk about that for a second? Now, Pro didn't get a delegate.
Nope.
He
No,
came in third. So no labels are saying, well, we could do what Perot did. How does that work? I really
Well,
don't understand.
right. And they
I
keep saying
mean,
things like they're going to win Delaware and
I mean,
Florida,
what?
Texas.
Like, I mean,
Hey,
it's
hey.
it's
The
kind of like my brothers out
it
there waving,
is it's
waving the
insane.
Confederate flag. Like, I don't know, we lost. What's the? I mean, I really don't think this is great. It's just the oddest thing, and they're doing it because they don't have any example, obviously, of where it did work.
Right,
So, you know,
right,
No, there's only George Wallace. Got to go back to George Wallace, 1968, before you get anybody who actually got electoral college votes.
right.
Everybody else since then, no way. And and even if that's the whole crazy thing about this, because if you just start doing the math of the places the Republican nominee is going to win Alabama's electoral college, Mississippi, I mean, you go through them, you go through California, the Democrat, Biden's going to win those. Um, and then you say, okay, well, let's give Joe Manchin or whoever it is 6 states. Even if you did that, it's just all the only chance you have is to put it into the House of Representatives, which then, of course, right now with the Republican
Right.
majority is that way is Trump again. No matter how you cut what No Labels is doing, it's a reckless, dangerous thing to be doing in this cycle. Period. And
From
by the
completely made
way,
up numbers.
yeah, completely made up, and with a lot of funding that they're hiding and won't talk about and don't want anybody to know about.
yeah,
Sounds
you can
real noble to me.
you can go on YouTube right now and see the 1968 Madison Square Garden speech that Wallace gave, which was an extraordinary speech. And it's very tempting to say it's something that Trump studied, but he never studied anything. It's just instinctual. But the attacks on the press and all this, um, there's no, and he had tremendous passion, and he had support of a lot of labor.
Right.
None of that is going to happen with a no labels candidate. And where did he get Wallace?
There's a great piece Corey Doctoroff wrote that I just read about the pizza burger party, in which the family half the family wants pizza, the other half of the family want burgers. And No Labels has this mistaken belief that you just put the pizzas and the burgers together and everybody's going to be really happy. Well,
Right.
no one's happy. No, you need to have a discussion and talk everybody into going to go for pizza or everybody going to burgers. There's no like, let's try to find some middle ground. And I thought it was a really insightful way to think about how wrong they are about where the country is deciding between democracy and this authoritarian crazy threat of Trump. And there is no there's no pizza burger that you can put together
That's right.
to make it work. Not
That's
happening.
right. Well, folks, it's gonna be another fast moving week. We've got the trial date is the initial trial date is now set for August 14th. That's going to be an eye opener, I think, for a lot of people. That the judge is probably gonna move the date. She always seems to do that, apparently. But we'll keep an eye on that. What else are you guys watching out for in the next week or so? Joe, how about you?
I'm really hoping. I'm trying to. I hope with a lot of the agitating that we're doing, it's some investigative reporter out there starts trying to connect some of these dots and some of the money and some of the Steve Bannon, RFK Jr. stuff because it's out there, and I think it's somebody you'd hope that there'd be some reporting out there that understood, to expose it, to put it out there. We'll see.
Yeah, yeah. Stuart, how about you? What are you watching?
Listen, I'm really watching Ukraine because I think that there is going to come a moment when there's going to be a decisive battle there, and they are going to
Yeah,
reach these fortifications where they still have been on the apparently sort of on the outskirts of the real
right,
fortifications.
right.
Um, and the outcome of the meeting Secretary of State had in China, if that is going to limit China's ability or desire, willingness is the word, to provide Russia with more support. Um, this one of these days, something big is going to happen there, and the impact on the world is going to be so consequential. Um, and we just have to hope and pray that Ukraine wins that day.
I I we're in the tone and screechiness of the pro-Russian propagandists out there, including noted military expert David Sachs, has reached a fever pitch in the last few days. It is absolutely
Mm-hmm.
crazy how angry they are and how they're predicting every day they're predicting the Russian defeat of the counteroffensive, and every day the Ukrainians scooch a few more kilometers in, and they're closing in on the point where they can almost cut off Crimea,
Mm-hmm.
and that is going to be a very, very different, uh, very, very different day for Vladimir Putin when he loses the biggest prize of his expansion in the entire tenure that he has held the presidency of Russia. So, well, folks, with that, I'm going to wrap it up. I wish everyone a very fine evening. We will be back again next Tuesday with more frivolity and hijinks, and more analysis of what the hell is going on in this mad world of politics. But until then, do me a favor, go out and follow Resolute Square on Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, Instagram, all the places. Subscribe to Resolute Square's email list. You'll get great columns every week from folks like the three of us, a number of other amazing voices that are out there: Ruth Ben Giat, Victor Shi, David Pepper, a lot of folks, Dan Barkoff, who are writing for Resolute, are really the leaders of the pro-democracy movement right now. And we're putting this column, we're putting this outlet together so that there's a place for folks who are willing to put the party stuff aside and talk about freedom, individual liberty, the autonomy of people to make their own political and personal decisions. And that's what Resolute Square is all about. So we'll hope you'll join us. And again, one other thing you can really do that's great is ask your friends to follow us as well. Share Resolute content with them on social media platforms. Every bit counts. You know, the whole subscribe, 5-star review thing, it's real in this environment we live in, folks. So we hope you'll support us in that way. Well, thanks again, everybody. We look forward to seeing you again next Tuesday. I'm Rick Wilson, and have a great night.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks, everybody.